So our next speaker is John Collingwood, and I met John at Tara Collingwood's 40th birthday party. And it was a really interesting moment when John came over to me and he said, "I need your help." What? What, John? I don't know what to do. I've never dated a widow before, and I want to get it right. And he was so kind, and I saw the look in his eyes, and I thought, this is an interesting moment. And I said, "John, there's only one thing you need to do." He said, "Oh, this looks a bit easy. I can do this." I said, "Here it is. Bring the joy." That's it. And from that moment on, we had a connection, and John is probably our biggest male advocate for Modern Widows Club. I don't know if you're planning on talking about Johnson & Johnson, but John works at the Human Performance Institute here in Lake Nona, and Johnson & Johnson turned us down to be a donor matching nonprofit. And John fought and fought and fought, and finally, like he said, "I will not take no for an answer," because this is the most important thing, women's health. And I know that because of Tara. And so I asked him to come and speak about dating a widow from a man's perspective, because I think it's a really valuable thing. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So bring the joy. I'm not sure how joyous this next 15 minutes is going to be, but it's a distinct pleasure to be up in front of all of you today. This is an organization that is very near and dear to my heart, and I was told that my wife introduced me as her hot husband earlier in the day. And all I can say to that is, thank God love is blind. I was also told that the good doctor spoke about when you're seeking out a potential partner, look for someone without an excess of body fat. Is that right? So I got that one right. So that's a good start. So I am Tara's second act. And as Carolyn said, I had no idea what I was stepping into. So I will share with you the lessons that I've learned. This is an N of 1. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't have a large sample size from which to draw scientific research from. But I'll share my own hard-won perspectives in the hope that some of them may be beneficial to you. So the first thing I'd like to say is that each of us, Tara and I, have a history. So when you come into a relationship, you have your respective histories, and you bring them, forward. So these photos were taken, both of them were taken in 2011. Neither of us had any idea what lay in store for us. The fact that Stephen, Tara's husband, would die on October the 8th, 2012, after a year-long battle with stomach cancer. I was there with my 2 young sons and my ex-wife, living what I thought was the perfect life. We were seemingly a happy couple. I had no idea that all that would be in tatters within a couple of years, and I'd have to rebuild from scratch and be a single father after having gone through a very nasty divorce. So we never know what is waiting around the corner. And I was struck earlier on about how many of you courageous ladies put your hands up when the question was asked, how many of your husbands died a very sudden death? And then once again, how many of you are in the first 2 years since your husband's passing? And that's very, very sobering to realize those two facts. So we had no idea in 2011 where we would end up later on. And it's important to note that it's critical to honor the past. And as will become apparent when I speak about Stephen and the role that he plays in our lives and always will play in our lives, it's important to honor the past, embrace the future, but that's a very nuanced balancing act. And I can't claim that we always get it right, but we do so in mindfulness and awareness, and we think about it and we talk about it. So it's not something that we leave to chance. So that was then, that was the the past. And this, as I'm very proud and happy and joyful to say, is the present and the future. Tara came into my life through work, funny enough. And at the time, as those of you who have heard me speak before, I said I was a very committed single dad. And all that was in my life and in my thought pattern was, I'll be the best father I can be. I will produce for the kids. And as far as the relationship stuff goes, I'm done. Put a fork in me. I will be a monk for the rest of my life. And those were my words, and that's what I told all my friends. And lo and behold, Tara showed up and completely transformed my life in the most positive way. So these are our 4 boys, and from your left to right, that's Basil boy on the left, the little blonde. Levi's the youngest, then comes Samuel, and then Maxim on the right-hand side. And they've all they've had birthdays this summer, so they are 8, 10, 12, and 14. So it would seem like we planned all this, but it's entirely random. So dating a widow. These are not just my own perspectives. I also did a little bit of research online about what to expect. So they're mostly personal, but I try to back them up with some research as well. The first thing I'd say is tread lightly and follow their lead, that being your lead. Each of you has been through a traumatic experience. The person who comes into your life really has no reference. I can never imagine what it would be like. I think I've got reasonable empathy skills, and I try and put myself in Tara's shoes. But in essence, I can never fully realize what it's like to lose someone so dear to you, whatever the circumstance, shockingly, suddenly, over a period of time. I have no reference for your loss. So I would say to any man coming into a relationship, dating a widow, is really try and be sensitive to that person, where they are in their grief process, how long they have been without their former partner, and then really follow their lead about how quickly or slowly you should proceed. It's a massive adjustment. People look at me very curiously. I mentioned in a previous talk to this very club that, and somewhat jokingly, but somewhat not jokingly, that Tara, Stephen, and I are involved in a spiritual threesome. Stephen's with us. I don't know what, my belief is in the afterlife. We are both strong Christians, and Stephen is with us, not just in photographs and in the prayers we say to Daddy in heaven every night with the boys, but it's on anniversaries, it's visiting his grave, it's chatting about Stephen with the in-laws, honoring his mother and her role as the matriarch in the family. So all these things we have done. No one's given us the playbook. We don't have the theory or the scientific background for how to deal with this, but we've done what feels right in the moment. And what feels right to us is that Stephen is incorporated in our lives, and he'll always be part of our lives. Relapses and unresolved emotions. It's not just between us, Tara and I. There are children involved. I have 2 children from my former marriage. They are now 12 and 14. Basil and Levi are 10 and 8. And it's never over. Emotions well up at the most unexpected of times. Basil, that cute little blonde on the left of the picture, he is now 10 years old. He has never once spoken of Stephen's death. But 3 nights ago, he came to me, and he sat on the couch, and he was in a flood of tears. And I said to him, "What's wrong, Basil?" And he said, "I miss Daddy." And I held him in my arms. Tara was out on a business engagement. And I said, "Well, tell me a little bit about that." So he said, I just miss Daddy, and I remember when he died. And Basil has never, ever spoken about this. So we spoke about it, and I said, tell me a little bit more. And he said, "I remember being in the hospital. I remember my aunt taking me up in the elevator, and she said to me to be strong and to try and be happy," which I thought was odd, but that's how he remembered it, for when he went into the room. And he said, "I went into the room, the whole family was there, everyone was crying, and that's what I remember." And I said to him, "Basil, I'm so happy you shared that with me. Daddy will always be with us. I'm so pleased you love Daddy. You can talk to Daddy. We pray to Daddy. Daddy in heaven will always be your father." I said, "I'll be the best Papa John." A little aside for you is that the 2 biological kids, Maxim and Samuel, they were raised French. They were born in Montreal, and we lived in Belgium and Switzerland. So they spoke more French than English for the first 5, 6 years of their lives. So they called me Papa, which is how French kids call their dad. So when I first met Basil and Levi, I was unsure what they would call me. So they heard Maxim and Samuel calling me Papa, and then Tara said, "Hello, John." So they just put 2 and 2 together, and I became Papa John. So unfortunately, I don't own any franchises, and I'm not that wealthy. But that's just, so they have Daddy in heaven, who's Stephen, and then they have Papa John. And I said, "I'll do the best I can for you, but I'll never replace Daddy." So I share all that to say relapses and unresolved emotions. Another one occurred at Christmas. Tara is a huge Christmas person, does a fabulous job. If any of you have ever tried her Christmas candy, I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. And for a registered dietitian, she loves her chocolate. It's kind of, it's a bit weird, but it somehow works. And Tara was hanging one of the ornaments on the Christmas tree, and you can sense there's like a drop in emotion and it's very difficult to put into words, it's intangible. But you can sense when the memories and emotions of Stephen come up and well up. And she started crying, and it was one of the ornaments that I think she and Stephen had bought together, and she was putting it up on the tree. So that came up, and we had a good talk about it and a good cry about it. And you never know when these things are going to come up, but you deal with them in the moment as best you can. And I think the critical thing is to allow space for that. I cry freely. I love tears. I was happy to see some tears in the room. I think it's one of the healthiest things people can do. Tara and I often, cry. We read the care pages she put together for Stephen, and the journey that she has traveled and the way she fought like a tigress for Stephen to try and keep him alive, take him to Germany for experimental treatment. She went to the ends of the earth for her husband. And she has my utmost respect for that. But when these emotions well up, as they do and as they will always, we just talk about it. So lots of unresolved emotions. I would also say that dating a widow, I don't come into this relationship unbroken and without my own stuff and my baggage. So I have my divorce grief to deal with. I have shared custody with the kids. There's a lot of stuff that comes up around that. There's some legal issues and financial issues. The only way we navigate through those is by talking about it. So communication lines have to remain open at all times. Next point, and this is probably for any of the men who are going to be fortunate enough to date you or are dating you right now, it's not a competition. I am not competing with Stephen. And I'll share with you something that I adopted Basil and Levi on June the 25th, 2015. And that was a very big day in my life. And we'll always memorialize that. But the attorney I was dealing with looked at me sympathetically and said, it must be really tough competing with a saint. Because I described to him a little bit about Stephen. Stephen was a stand-up guy, a pillar of the community, church-going guy, did a lot of volunteer work, was loved by all he came into contact with. And it struck me, I had never ever thought about that. I've never thought about I was competing with Tara for affection and vying with Stephen for that. I don't know if that makes me a weirdo. Maybe I should be jealous, but I'm not. But be aware that some people have said, and some of the research I've done said that jealousy can well up, and people might feel that there's some competition underway. But certainly for us, I don't feel it's a competition. In fact, I'm very grateful to Stephen for being such a stand-up character, for having such a healthy, positive relationship with Tara. Because as any of you know, prior relationships affect future relationships. So Stephen has my utmost respect. Loss of spouse is not the same as divorce. Some of the widows I've spoken to said the worst thing is hearing the cliches in the days, weeks, months, and years after your husbands have passed. And someone once said, I think I wish I could punch someone in the face every time they shared another cliche with me. So I get the fact that there's a lot of well-intentioned people out there. There are a lot of well-intentioned people. But anyone who tries to equate your loss of your spouse with a divorce or, as it has been said online, the loss of a pet or the loss of something else, it's almost unbearable for me to hear that sort of stuff. But I just wanted to put up there that loss of spouse is definitely not the same as divorce. And dealing with my ex-wife is not a problem compared to the trauma that Tara has had to go through with Stephen's passing. This next point, someone said to me, well, you've been married for a couple of years now, it must be great, everyone's happy, Tara's a fantastic, beautiful woman, and you've got a tremendous family. It must all be good, right? And it is good, it's fantastic. But there's no statute of limitations on grief. I don't think there's ever going to be a time when Stephen is not with us, when Tara will not suddenly collapse in a flood of tears, when it will not come up for the kids and we'll have to deal with it. So that's my expectation going into this, that we will always deal with some form of the grief. Okay, this is a good one. Dealing with multiple in-laws. They say you can choose your friends but not your family, right? That's the old cliche. So interestingly, a lot of the conversations and the heated conversations Tara and I have had have been around in-laws. So you come into a system, an existing system, and I have my family, Tara has family, and the only way I know how to make sense of it is, and I said this to Stephen's sister the other day. We were at a function. What was it? It was Basil's. It's one of the camps. You go to these camps and they do a week and then they present them to the family. And my sister-in-law is what I call her, was there, and that's Stephen's sister, but she's not my sister-in-law. She's not a blood relative. She's not, she doesn't fit that title. But I said to her, look, I'm going to introduce you as my sister-in-law. So that family has become my family overnight. Probably enough said on that point. Communication is key. I think the thread that's run through all the things I've shared with you is that it's critical to communicate openly and often. Not to be in denial about anything. I love the fact that, Joanne, I think you said the grief process it takes 3 years from when it starts. So there's a lot of denial that goes on in dealing with grief. But I like to think that Tara and I talk things out. It's not always comfortable. It's not always pleasant. But we try and unpack all the stuff, not just the bright lights and the good times and the happiness, but all the murky stuff that needs to be dealt with in order to move forward. So these are some of the comments I'll make about dating a widow. This song, we went to Northland Church when I first met Tara, and that was a great source of support for us, and we were both Christians, and they ran a workshop for blended families. And I wasn't aware, but there was a statistic mentioned there that 70% of blended families fail. And that's a horrible stat. And I was thinking, we brought together our rambunctious 4 boys, and I don't want to be in that number. And as I was driving on the way to one of these workshops, this song by Pink came on the radio. And I just want to highlight that second line there. Just a second, we're not broken, just bent, and we can learn to love again. So in my mind's eye, my paradigm was, I'm a monk, I'm single, I'm committedly single for the rest of my life. I clearly suck at this marriage thing, and I'm never going there again. And in a couple of short years, I can tell you that my life has been transformed. I'm madly in love with Tara. We have a beautiful blended family, and a lot of it is due to the Modern Widows Club. Because of the support that Tara found, the fact that she could be with her fellow Wisters, people who understood what she was going through, and she went through the fire and has emerged stronger for it, and she would not have been available to me had she not found the Modern Widows Club. So to Carolyn and Modern Widows, all of you in the room, I express my gratitude for making that possible. All right, we have a couple of mottos I'd like to share with you. So this is on the beach in Captiva Island. I don't know if anyone knows that. It's a barrier island just next to Sanibel. It's one of our favorite places, and in fact, that's where I proposed to Tara on New Year's Eve in 2014. And it's a very special place and always will be. But next to our mirror in our bathroom, Tara has a poster that someone gave her. And the words on that poster are, "It is never too late to live happily ever after." So despite whatever travails, whatever tragedy you've been through, and I know you've been through a lot, never doubt the fact that as miraculously as it happened for us, something similar could happen for you should you choose it, should you wish it. Because it certainly blindsided me. I had no idea that life could be this good and that I would find Tara. So our second motto is, the greatest gift we can give those who have gone before us is to live fully in their place. So I've told you about Stephen. I thought it appropriate that we have a picture of this good-looking guy up here as well. He was 50 years old when he passed. By all accounts, he was a devoted husband to Tara and a loving father to Basil and Levi. And one of the favorite verses that he quoted was from Timothy about fighting the good fight and finishing the race. He, like Tara, was a fantastic marathon runner. And that verse was near and dear to him. And he will be forever in my heart and our hearts. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. I'm not sure that I brought the joy, but I hope that I brought a few pieces of advice for those of you who might consider dating again. One thing, if I may make a request to anyone in the room who's in the Orlando area. We have 4 boys. We have busy lives. We both work. if any of you ever would like to babysit for us, feel free to contact Tara. Thank you.